Dawn hit like a missed step on a dark stair. I was already dressed, standing in my kitchen in Brooklyn Heights, staring at my third calendar, paper one, just to triple check. Something felt wrong, and the only thing ringing in my head was my son Patrick's voice saying, "I'm going to ask Jenna to marry me." My name's Nate Campbell. I'm 42. I live in New York and I run a real estate development firm. I don't lose sleep over market swings or zoning boards. But this knocked me flat. Before we start, tell us which city or country you're listening from. Let's see which corners of the world we've gathered from today. Thanks. And now the story. Last Thursday over roast chicken, I even remember the plate he used. He just said it. Calm, steady, no apology, no hesitation. Her name's Jenna. I love her. He said he'd made up his mind. I heard it like a verdict. Because I'd made a plan. Patrick and Jessica Phillips. A clean alignment. Her father, Norman, has the marina rights in Red Hook. We're mid-negotiation on a $240 million mixed-use project. The kind of legacy thing you build once and retire off of. Patrick marrying Jessica tied it all together. Dock access, donor parties, waterfront press. No drama, no surprises. But Jenna? I didn't even know who that was. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. I didn't yell. That's not my style. I manage. I pivot. I strategize. But the next day, I found a pregnancy test box shoved in the trash under the condo's bathroom sink. Pink wrapper, half creased, like someone tried to hide it in a hurry. I stood there staring at it, hands braced on the counter, chest tight. Could have been left by anyone, sure. But the math started clicking. Surprise fiancé, quick timeline, no warning. My control board lit up all at once. I told myself I wasn't going to interfere. Told myself I respected his decision. I'm his father, not his warden. But I also told myself I had to know who she was. Both things felt true. And those two truths fought like dogs in my head. That Tuesday we had a big investor roundtable. 19 people, some with patience for market swings, but none for personal drama. I was supposed to open the meeting, but all I kept doing was watching the clock. The bigger weight was Norman. He'd pulled me aside last week at that awful Midtown club he loves, hinted at some gentleman's NDA. Either my son stayed aligned with his daughter, or Red Hook stalled. Dock rights don't float on their own, he'd said. I hadn't answered, but I knew that tone. A bill was coming due. Patrick left the building around 10, nothing on his calendar. I watched him through the glass wall of my office. Blue windbreaker, walking with purpose. I hated how fast I grabbed my jacket. I hated myself more when I hit the street behind him. Last time I followed my son, he was 13 and had ditched soccer practice to buy a broken bike. He's 22 now, and I was tailing him like a second-rate PI with a steering wheel. Traffic through Brooklyn was slow. Deli trucks, school buses, stop-and-go tension. Patrick finally pulled into a side street near Bay Ridge. Maple trees, cracked sidewalks, quiet houses with porch flags and 4-unit duplexes. Not his style. Not mine either. He parked in front of a worn-out duplex with chipped trim and a cracked mailbox. He waited, engine running, then gave a light honk. Just once. A woman came out. Couldn't see her face. Just a simple sweater, ponytail, quick laugh. She climbed into his car like it was the most natural thing in the world. They pulled away. I didn't follow. I just sat there in my SUV, engine off, fingers drumming the wheel, heart doing math I didn't like. I hadn't vetted her. I didn't know her name, her job, her family. No financials, no background, just a blur and a laugh. That was the moment I realized. My son had a whole life that didn't pass through me. And I was standing at the curb like a guy who missed his shift change and still wanted to file the report. I came back early the next morning. Same block, same cracked sidewalk, same stubborn knot in my stomach. I parked half a block down this time. Less obvious, less desperate. But I was still there for the same reason. Jenna. Or so I told myself. The air had that wet, metallic chill that rolls in from the water and sticks to your collar. One of those mornings where it feels like the city's watching you. I walked up the same duplex steps and noticed the bell was busted, hanging sideways with rust on the bracket. That irritated me immediately, which tells you a lot about how I'm wired. I knocked. Hard. 3 firm hits. The kind that announces someone who thinks they have business. I didn't. But I needed answers. And I didn't trust the silence I'd been given. Then the door opened, and I forgot what I was even supposed to say. It was Hannah. She looked exactly like I remembered. 10 years younger than me, maybe more tired around the eyes, but still her. Same calm stare. Same way she stood without flinching, like she'd already weighed whatever was coming. Nate, she said. Just my name. But the way she said it, it sounded like it was carrying years, like it had edges. I stood there like a fool, nodding, hands stiff in my coat pockets. Whatever speech I'd drafted on the drive, something polite, neutral, maybe even charming, it dropped out of my head like a wrench down a sewer grate. Before I could say anything, a little girl stepped in beside her. Brown hair under a navy headband, a spiral notebook pressed to her chest like armor. She stared right at me, like I was a math problem she could solve if she took her time. "We're not looking for anything," Hannah said, her tone polite but guarded, like someone who's dealt with enough nonsense to know it always shows up early. Sorry, I muttered. Wrong unit. Thought I had the right door. My voice cracked at the end, which annoyed me more than the doorbell. The little girl, 9, maybe 10, stepped forward and held the door open for me like she worked there. "Bye," she said softly, serious as a judge. I turned fast, felt my ears burn. My face was on fire. I've closed land deals with 3 zeros in the comma column and never felt that exposed in my life. Halfway down the steps, I saw it. The other entrance. Opposite side of the duplex. A second mailbox, weathered but still holding yesterday's junk mail. That's when it hit me. I'd banged on the wrong door. I stood there on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, just trying to breathe. Thought if I held still long enough, maybe the street would give me back my dignity. But no, I was a grown man, tailing his adult son, knocking on the wrong door like a creep, and getting called out by a kid with better manners than me. It wasn't who I wanted to be, but that morning made it clear. Wanting doesn't change a single thing. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovered over Patrick's name. I typed, deleted, retyped. First message, "We need to talk about Jenna." Backspace. Second, "Let's grab lunch, just us." Gone. Third one I sent, "Zoning review flag on lot 12, check notes before session." Neutral, cold, cowardly. I rolled into Midtown around 10, but the image of Hannah standing in that doorway wouldn't leave me. She looked older, but not weak, just worn down, like she'd had to make too many choices with not enough time. And that girl? She had that same posture, back straight, lips pressed, eyes too careful. You can spot a kid who's learned how to protect their parent. It's not something you fake. The worst part? I cared. I wanted to know who she was, what she knew, how she'd ended up in that small house behind a broken doorbell. And I hated that I wanted it. By the time I hit the FDR, I'd already made 2 new promises to myself. 1, stay in my lane. No more following. No more games. Just meet Jenna, judge fairly, and accept whatever came next. 5 minutes later, I broke that promise. I decided I'd talk to Jenna directly, today, after the investor session. Not a trap, not a confrontation, just a conversation. Because if my son was serious, and he sounded dead serious, then I needed to know her. Not her resume, not her credit score. Her, the real version. The one I didn't get a file on. I'd spent too long believing I could chart every next move like a site plan. I used to think I knew every door I was supposed to walk through. But that morning, that wrong knock, it hit something deeper. It reminded me that the one door I didn't plan to open was the one that cracked me wide open. And that humiliation, sharp as it was, stripped something off me I didn't know I still carried. Old pride, old pain, maybe both. I stepped into the glass-walled conference room on 42nd Street, tie tight, jacket sharp, and jaw already clenched from the drive. The refinance agenda was loaded. Title amendments, coastal variance clauses, plus 2 funds waiting to pounce on anything soft. I scanned the room, took inventory. That's when I saw her. End of the table. Tabs stacked, blazer tailored, eyes calm. She wasn't speaking loud, but people leaned in. That's the mark of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. She was walking the room through indemnity clauses on the Red Hook restructure. Not our side. She was counsel for the building's management firm, which meant she was technically our counterparty. But she moved through the legal weeds like she'd planted them herself. Clean, methodical, firm. I pressed her hard, asked about carve-outs, legacy easements, environmental holdbacks. She didn't flinch. She cited case law out of memory, laid out the structure, and looked me right in the eye while doing it. Not defensive, not deferential, just good. Too good to be ignored. About halfway through the deck, I caught motion in the glass behind her. Patrick walking by. I clocked him before anyone else did. I should have connected it right then. Should have felt something click. When the session wrapped, before anyone had even packed their laptops, Patrick stepped in from the hall like he belonged there. He didn't wait. He walked straight to her, leaned in, and kissed her on the temple. Then he turned to me and said, "Dad, this is Jenna." I blinked, literally blinked, like I'd just taken a punch with no wind-up. My mouth moved before my brain could catch up. "Pleasure," I said, though it sounded like someone else had borrowed my voice. In my head, I was watching Hannah's front porch on loop. Wrong woman, wrong door, wrong life. Jenna? She was standing 2 feet away, watching me like she didn't need anything. Not approval, not favors, just acknowledgement. Patrick slid a hand in his pocket and added, "We didn't say anything sooner because we didn't want office gossip turning our life into a podcast." He wasn't joking. I heard the line in his tone. This wasn't up for review. I didn't love hearing that, but I had to admit it made a kind of sense. Patrick had been raised in meetings. He knew how rumors turned into headlines, even inside a company you built. "We're engaged," he said, voice level. "And no," Jenna added, "we're not rushing because of anything. There's no surprise, just timing." Her tone wasn't defensive. It was decisive, like she knew exactly what I was thinking and didn't need to duck it. I felt my whole theory collapse in one sentence. The pregnancy test box at the condo, completely irrelevant. I felt stupid. Not wrong. Stupid. "For the record," she said, turning to me with the same lawyer voice she'd used on the indemnities, "my firm will step back from anything that looks conflicted. I've already flagged the dual representation risk and recommended your team retain independent counsel. I'll keep it limited to strategy and introductions until transition is clean." I nodded because it was the only thing to do. That answer wasn't for me. It was for the room. She was showing her cards publicly to make sure no one questioned the deal later. After the room loosened a little, a junior guy from one of the funds, Dunn maybe, leaned back and joked to Patrick, "So is your detective dad sitting in on all the weekly calls?" It got a few chuckles, but I caught the shift. That was the moment the tone shifted. People started putting pieces together. Me tailing Patrick. Me showing up out of nowhere. The kind of over-involvement that smells like weak leadership. That's the price you pay when you try to control without owning it. I cleared my throat. "I tailed my son yesterday," I said, flat. The room went dead quiet. It was wrong. Going forward, our side will retain separate counsel. Jenna will recuse herself from anything conflicted and stay at the strategic level only. I'll handle permits, budgets, delivery. Personal lanes stay personal. No one clapped, but you could feel the room exhale. A woman from a pension fund I barely knew nodded like she'd been waiting for me to stop being a cliché. Patrick's shoulders eased a bit. Those micro-reactions, people don't fake those. That's where the trust lives. Once the room broke, I hung back. Jenna approached, calm as ever. "I live next door to Hannah," she said before I could ask. "We share a wall. She's private, proud, been through a rough stretch." She watched my face the whole time, like she already knew exactly where my head had gone. "Thank you," I said. Nothing else. She nodded once and left it there. On the elevator down, I checked my phone and saw a missed call from Norman Phillips. The voicemail preview said just enough to really upset me. Finalizing the protections, keeping family alignments clean. I didn't listen to the rest. I already knew what it meant. The phrase family alignments made my skin crawl. Patrick stood next to me, thumbs tapping his phone. He didn't look up when he said, "The test box in the condo sink? One of the associates crashed there during a fumigation at her building. Not ours." I nodded. Of course. That's how blind you get when you're too busy drawing battle plans instead of asking real questions. As we stepped outside into the December noise, cabs honking, wind curling off the buildings, I knew two things. One, I needed to stop managing Patrick's life like it was a quarterly report. Two, I wasn't done with Hannah. Not even close. I didn't call ahead, just showed up late afternoon with a brown paper bag from a bakery in Carroll Gardens, 6 cookies, 2 scones, and a lie about them being for the building. That's how I walked back up Hannah's steps, like a man pretending he knew what he was doing. The girl, same one from the door, cracked it open and stared at me like a customs officer with nothing to prove. She didn't say hi, just glanced at the bag, then at me, and said, "Is that from the place with the red awning or the one with the window cats?" "Red awning," I said. "You approve?" She gave a slow nod like she was granting access. "You can come in if it's not oatmeal raisin." "It's not." She stepped aside. "I'm Faith," she said. "You knocked on the wrong side before." I followed her in and closed the door behind me. The place was spotless but tired. Mismatched furniture, clean countertops, some drawings taped to the wall. The kind of careful you only learn when money's a fight you've stopped pretending you're winning. Faith pointed at the couch. "Sit there," she said. Then she took the chair across from me, legs too short to reach the floor, notebook still in hand. I sat down, the cookie bag on my lap, and watched her watch me. "You a friend of my mom?" "I used to be," I said. "A long time ago." She didn't blink. "You're Patrick's dad." I froze just a second but nodded. "Yeah, I am." She opened her notebook and flipped through 2 pages like she was checking something. Then she looked up again. "Do you work at the big office with the red elevators?" "I do." "My mom said you were too busy for anything small." I swallowed hard. She's not wrong. Faith leaned back like she was done with the warm-up round. "I get picked on at school. Art class, gym class, doesn't matter. I don't have the right stuff." That's what one girl said. The right stuff. "You mean supplies?" I asked. "Supplies, shoes. Some people just know when you don't have what they have." She shrugged, but her voice didn't crack. "It's okay. I just try to get through the day. Mom says school isn't forever." She wasn't complaining. She was giving me a report, a field memo from the front lines of 9 years old. "What does your mom do?" Faith's whole face changed. Lips pressed, eyes tight. She didn't speak right away. "She got sick," she said eventually. "We go to clinics. Sometimes she can't breathe right when she's tired. Sometimes her voice goes out. But she still walks me to the bus." I gripped the cookie bag so tight the plastic inside crinkled loud. I knew doctors. I knew hospitals with views of the skyline. I knew how to throw money at problems. But I didn't know what to say to a kid looking straight through me with eyes that didn't ask for a thing. The door opened behind her. Groceries, a coat, that familiar spine. Hannah stepped in like she'd been expecting me, or expecting something worse. "I figured you'd circle back," she said, setting the bags down without looking at me. "I brought cookies," I said. Weak, but it was what I had. "Of course you did." I stood up, wiped my palms on my pants. "Look, about the other morning." "Water under the bridge," she said, still not facing me. "Wrong door, wrong timing. Story of our lives." I took one step toward her. "I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. For the morning. For 12 years ago. For all of it." That got her to stop unpacking. She turned. Arms crossed, jaw set. "You want coffee?" she asked. "Sure." The two of us in a narrow kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and vinegar cleaner. I stood while she worked the machine. She moved a little slower than I remembered, like something was pulling on her breath. "What's really going on?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just poured coffee into a chipped mug and set it in front of me. Then she leaned against the counter and folded her arms again. "I've got a tumor on my thyroid," she said. "Benign, they think, but it presses when I talk too much or get winded. Surgery's simple, bills aren't. Insurance? Limited. Some lapses. What's the number?" "Nate. I'm not here with a deal. I'm not trading doc rights for your health. I'm just asking." She stared at me long enough I thought she wasn't going to answer. "It's operable," she said again. "Just not affordable right now." The number landed in my head anyway. I hated that instinct. Cost modeling someone's life. Years of spreadsheets will rot your soul. "I can make calls," I said. "I don't want strings." "The only string is faith sleeping through the night without worrying about your breath." That one landed. She didn't soften, but her eyes blinked slower. "Zach's brother's been calling," she said after a moment. "Some old loan Zach took on a flip job. Nothing on paper that holds, but he's been circling. Said we should settle up like family." I filed it away for Jenna. "I'll make the calls," I said. "No deals, just calls. You can pay me back in attitude." She almost smiled. Almost. Faith came back in and sat beside me like I hadn't left. "Will you be there when Mom gets the surgery?" I didn't even pause. Yes. Hannah was watching me when I said it. Not hopeful. Just watching. It's the kind of look you only get from someone who remembers everything you failed to say the first time around. On the way out, I told Faith I'd get her new gym shoes and a set of watercolors. She didn't argue. Just nodded and said, "Thank you, Mr. Campbell," like a little adult who'd been let down enough to make manners a shield. I got back in the car and drove toward the bridge. At some point, I realized I hadn't checked my calendar in over an hour. It felt like a stolen vacation. Norman summoned me the next morning to his office near Pier 84, the old converted warehouse that smelled like varnish, leather, and inherited confidence. He poured coffee slow, like it was a ceremony, using some thin porcelain cups that looked like they'd crack if you raised your voice. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't waste time. "Has your son gotten distracted?" he asked, barely lifting his eyes. "He's gotten serious," I said. His jaw ticked once, like I'd said the wrong answer on a test I didn't know he was giving. "I'll keep my slips on your Red Hook plan unlocked," he said, "if we keep our families aligned." He slid a 2-page document across the lacquered table, crisp and folded at the center. A side letter, dressed up like an NDA, stamped with the subtle thread of white shoe stationery. I skimmed fast. It wasn't complex. It didn't need to be. In 2 pages it laid out a quiet chokehold. If Patrick didn't end up with Jessica, our access to his marina infrastructure would experience technical reviews, which meant months of nothing. Burn rate, investor panic, the whole spiral. "You're bartering my kid," I said. He didn't blink. "Then don't call it barter," he said. "Call it foresight." I folded the paper and stuck it in my coat pocket like something I didn't want to leave on someone else's desk. "Don't wait too long," he added. "Timing is leverage." "I don't trade my son," I said. Norman leaned back, smug in that way only men with inherited empires manage. Of course you do. You just don't say it out loud. I walked into our boardroom the next morning and immediately caught the scent of gossip. Low, fast, acidic. Whispers passing like notes in 8th grade. Someone had heard I tailed Patrick. Someone else thought we were halting production because of family drama. The buy-side boys love a story until the story costs schedule. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table and waited for them to run out of steam. Patrick was already there, seated at the far end, calm and collected, Jenna beside him with a binder marked NDA Risk Map. The title alone made my stomach tighten. She didn't look at me when she opened it. She looked at the room. There is a potential restraint of trade problem if Campbell Development signs or acknowledges anything resembling leverage based on family alignment, she said. A couple analysts tried not to stare at me. She continued, crisp, unfazed. Also a conflict of interest. Also reputational risk. Also regulatory exposure. It's sloppy and it's unnecessary. I bristled just seeing the binder. For a second I thought she was here to attack Patrick's side, like she was choosing clients over relationships. But she wasn't defending him or me. She was defending the project. She laid out 3 alternate paths, efficient and boring in the way that saves careers. Shift berths to the City Maritime Trust in Sunset Park, build a shuttle to a private mooring partner with 27 slips up in Inwood, or adjust phasing so year 1 didn't require dock activation. Not glamorous, not headline-worthy, but alive. Patrick looked at me across the table. He didn't speak, but his silence had a weight. Do you trust me now? Yes, I said out loud, in front of all of them. Then I did the harder thing. And the boundary stands. I won't tail him. I won't meddle. Patrick runs operations. Pens moved again. Postures straightened. A guy from a pension fund, one who'd been cold to me last quarter, met my eye and gave the smallest nod. Jenna didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped half an inch, like she could finally breathe. Motion to proceed without Norman's involvement? Someone asked. Seconded, someone else said. Hands went up. Agreement was unanimous. I called the City Maritime Trust after the meeting and asked for FaceTime. The director, Coleman, picked up herself, not an assistant. Coffee in 2 days, she said. Bring a 1-pager. No fuss, no ceremony. I felt my lungs come back online. Norman called within an hour. No greeting. Just, who have you talked to? We're exploring options, I said. He hung up so hard the line cracked. I pictured him grinding his molars down to dust. 30 minutes later, Patrick walked into my office with his phone held out. Jessica texted me, he said. I took it. 3 short lines. I don't want any part of a marriage on paper. Tell your dad I'm on your side. I handed the phone back. Ask her to coffee, I said. Patrick raised an eyebrow, waiting for the catch. No catch, I said. Just tell her thank you. He stayed still a second longer than usual. Then he nodded and left. That was the first adult conversation we'd had all week. When I finally got back to my desk, an envelope waited. Cheap stock, addressed in black ink with no return. Inside were 2 photocopies. One was Norman's side letter. The other was a schedule of city dock inspections, dates circled in red pen, like someone wanted me to believe a regulatory hammer was about to drop. It was an amateur threat and a professional one at the same time. I didn't panic. I didn't toss it. I didn't pretend it didn't matter. I put both pages in a red folder marked Risk. I walked down the hall and dropped it on Jenna's desk. She looked up, eyebrows already raised. Open it, I said. She slid the pages out, scanned them, and didn't say anything right away. Then she looked at me and said, This is leverage and intimidation. Whoever sent this didn't expect you to know the difference. Can you handle it? I asked. She closed the folder. I already am. She stood up, grabbed her coat, kissed Patrick on the cheek without asking, and walked past me like she was late to a battle she'd already planned to win. I didn't stop her. I didn't offer help. I just followed her out of the room because the only thing worse than being threatened is pretending you don't feel it. 9 days later, I walked into the hospital with a small bag in one hand and a dozen things I wasn't ready to say in the other. Slippers, hand lotion, paperback. The kind of comfort items you bring someone when you're trying to show up without making it a production. Hannah had asked for nothing, which only made me want to do more. At the bottom of the bag was something I hadn't packed. Faith had slipped in a folded piece of paper. Crayon drawing of a lighthouse, bold strokes, the words "safe," written in big block letters across the top. No sun, no boats, just that tower standing on a rock like it wasn't going anywhere. It hit harder than I wanted to admit. Hannah's room had one window with blinds that didn't quite close all the way. The late sun found its way in anyway. She looked tired, pale at the edges, but not beaten. Never beaten. I set the bag on the table and adjusted the intravenous line that had gotten stuck under her arm. "You didn't have to come this early," she said. "I wasn't sleeping anyway," I said. I turned to leave, to give her space, or maybe to give myself a minute to regroup, when she said, "Wait." She reached into her tote bag, the same one she always used, and pulled out a single sheet of paper, creased a dozen times, edges frayed. "I was going to throw it out," she said, "but I couldn't." She held it out. I took it, slowly. It was a letter, dated 9 summers ago. Her handwriting, the loops and slants I remembered. I unfolded it and started reading. She'd written that she loved me, that she'd always loved me, that if I said the word, she'd choose me. Not Zach, not the easy path. Me. She'd written it the summer after Faith was born. Said she waited for me to come around. Said she gave up when I didn't. I read the whole thing out loud. I don't know why. Maybe because folding it back up felt like putting it away again. And I wasn't doing that this time. When I finished, I looked at her and said, "I'm choosing you now, because now is what counts." She looked away, eyes glassy. "I wrote that during the worst summer of my life. I never sent it. I figured you'd already made your decision." My hands tightened around the paper. "That spring, before your wedding, we had that one night. I remember. We never talked about it after. We weren't supposed to. And then it broke. Quiet, contained, but real." She started crying. Not movie tears, not dramatic, just quiet, angry crying like it had been waiting a long time to show up. When she could breathe again, she said it. "Faith is yours." I didn't move. Zach knew. I told him early. He said he'd raise her anyway. He said love doesn't need paperwork. But I thought if I told you, you'd pick the safe plan. Or worse, you'd forgive me without meaning it. My brain ran the numbers. Birthdays. That night. The hospital visit I skipped. The first grade photo Patrick had once shown me with the girl in the background who looked too familiar. But all I said was, "I'm here." I took her hand and said it again. "I'm here. And I'm not just showing up for court dates and medical forms. I want all of it. Mornings, drop-offs, Sunday pancakes. Whatever this is, I want it to have a shape." She watched me like she didn't quite believe it yet, like she was waiting for me to flinch. "If something happens during surgery," she said, "promise me you'll look after Faith. Fully. Like she's yours." "She is mine," I said. "And I will. No caveats." "And Zach's brother?" "I'll deal with him," I said. "You don't need to." Her jaw eased a little. That tension she carries in her shoulders dropped just a notch. I stepped into the hallway and called Jenna. She picked up on the second ring. "Need 3 things," I said. "Consent order affiliation, simple parenting plan, small escrow to keep Zach's brother from making noise." She didn't pause. "Got it," she said. "Also, I've already got someone watching Norman's movement calendar." I hung up and went back in. The surgery took 3 hours. I sat in the waiting area with Faith, playing hangman on a notepad. She beat me 4 straight games. "You pick awful words," she said. "You think contractor is awful?" She raised her eyebrows like I'd suggested asphalt for kindergarten spelling. No kid says contractor. You're trying too hard. She wasn't wrong. When the doctor came out and said the words clean margins, I didn't even realize I was still holding the pen from the last round. My whole body had been locked up for 3 straight hours, and I hadn't noticed until it let go. I bought 2 coffees from the vending machine, spilled one while checking my texts, because apparently I lose fine motor skills when I'm relieved. When Hannah woke up, her first question was, did she eat? 2 cookies, a juice box, and half my nerves. I pulled the chair up close and told her what I should have said a decade ago. I didn't choose the safe path. I just got scared. I thought I was a bad bet. She didn't respond right away. She just closed her eyes and squeezed my hand. That squeeze said we weren't going to keep rewriting old chapters. That squeeze said, we're here now. Faith had curled up in the corner chair under a scratchy hospital blanket. Her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around a stuffed dog that looked like it had been through a few wars. I sat there watching her breathe and realized how many times I'd told myself I had it all under control, how many years I'd confused structure for love. I tried to count. I stopped at a number that made me sick. I stood, kissed Hannah's forehead, and stepped into the hallway to clear my head. As I rounded the corner toward the elevators, a man brushed past me with deliberate force. Shoulder bump, not accidental. Leather coat, familiar face, Zach's brother. I recognized him from the wake. He didn't say a word, but his message was clear. I didn't bother playing the tough guy. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Texted Jenna. He's here. Then I turned around and walked back toward the room where my daughter was sleeping. The next morning, Norman went public blunt. That's his style when charm stops working. One of his lawyers made a couple quiet calls to 2 of our lenders. Nothing recorded, nothing that crossed a legal line. Just a few phrases like, project dependencies may evolve if family alignments remain uncertain. Polished enough to sound harmless. Loaded enough to rattle someone looking to move capital. By noon, I'd already had 3 messages from analysts asking if the engagement was still stable. That's how fast poison spreads. I didn't answer right away. I walked straight into Jenna's office and dropped a printout of one of the lender emails on her desk. She skimmed it, handed it back without flinching. Check your inbox, she said. I did. She'd already pulled 3 archived emails from old city inspections, doc approvals, logistics timing, and a cozy little exchange about timelines aligning with stakeholder needs. Norman's name wasn't on the official chain, but he'd been CC'd under a consultant alias he used to filter political stuff. Jenna had packaged it into a clean 3-page memo, timeline, risk summary, supporting documentation. One version went to Director Coleman at the City Maritime Trust, the other to a watchdog reporter I'd trusted once during a zoning battle in Yonkers. Jenna didn't ask for permission. She didn't need it. She'll take it from here, Jenna said, nodding toward the reporter's name. She knows what to sniff for. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Jessica Phillips. She wanted to meet, said she had something and didn't want to talk on the phone. I picked a diner on 11th, neutral, loud, nobody there to watch. She came in wearing a gray hoodie, no makeup, no earrings. She looked like someone trying to disappear on purpose. He's using me like a hinge, she said after the coffee hit the table. You know that, right? I'm not a hinge. I believe you, I said. You don't owe me anything. She pulled a thumb drive from her pocket and set it next to the napkin holder. 3 templates, all labeled Gentleman's Understanding. He used them on 2 other developers, both folded. I didn't reach for it right away. I want out, she said, from the shadow version of all this. Helping you is my exit ramp. I nodded, then took the drive and slipped it into my inside pocket. You did the right thing. I know, she said. That's why I'm not crying. She left without touching her food. I paid the check and texted Jenna. Incoming gift. Big one. 2 nights later, Zach's brother served Hannah at home with a folded demand letter in a manila envelope like he thought paperweight made it real. He claimed she owed $42,800 from a family-held estate note. No signature, no disbursement schedule, just a printed Excel sheet and a threat. Jenna had already drafted the reply before I could even send her a scan. She preserved rights, cited lack of evidence, and requested a full accounting. We moved $10,000 into an escrow account to hold him at bay while we worked the title records and dug through his paper trail. He didn't expect resistance. That's always their first mistake. The City Maritime Trust meeting was better than I let myself hope. Director Coleman had a folder already open when we walked in. She'd printed out our mixed income plan, highlighted our community use stats, and clipped in a copy of Jenna's memo. "I don't like being leveraged," she said, opening with a smile. "Especially not by people who own boats they don't even drive." She showed us a map with 3 pier options in Sunset Park. We didn't need all 3, just one to start. She gave us a handshake and a draft timeline for calendar approvals. Not a final, but close enough to breathe. I came back to the office and circulated a 1-page memo to all department heads. Patrick runs operations. Independent counsel handles legal. Jenna advises only. No contract, no retainer, no signatures on file. In the weekly meeting, I stuck to budget and schedule. No sidebar drama, no side eyes across the table. Just numbers. It cost me to write that memo. Felt like pulling teeth to give up the wheel, but it paid off. People sat straighter, took better notes, started asking better questions. I've run companies long enough to know, when the air clears, people build you a better house than the one you micromanaged. That night, Norman called again. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. "If you walk away from this NDA, you're out. You'll regret it." I called him back. "I prefer sunlight," I said. "You're making a mistake. I can live with that." Click. 20 hours later, the article hit. Headline: "Quiet pressure on public waterfront permits raises eyebrows in City Hall." It didn't name names, but the marina in the photo was one of Norman's. People who mattered could connect the dots. The ones who didn't? They'd catch up by lunch. Norman didn't call me the next morning. When he's quiet, he's bleeding. I sent Jessica a small bouquet and a card with 5 words. "Thank you for being straight." Patrick texted me a thumbs up and a photo of Jenna at her desk. Hair up, sleeves rolled, grinning like someone who just knocked a brick out of a castle wall. I saved the photo. Back at my desk, I found my hand on Hannah's old letter again. I didn't even realize I'd picked it up. Creases worn smooth from all the times I'd folded and unfolded it. Sometimes you hold on to a thing because you're not ready to say out loud that you're the one who broke it in the first place. Hannah came home sore but lighter. The bruising around her voice had faded to something soft. She walked like someone recovering, not retreating. Faith opened the door for her like a nurse on duty and announced, "We've been good," before I could even say hello. She wasn't wrong. Faith pulled up her shirt just enough to show me the healing line, all neat staples and medical glue. "Cool, right?" she said. "You want to see the chart I made?" "I do," I said, and meant it. She handed me a paper with 5 colors and 3 columns. Meals, pain scale, breath rating. She called it the recovery index. I didn't flinch looking at the scar. That seemed to earn me points I hadn't known I needed. We moved slow, short walks to the corner store. Tea instead of coffee. Hannah still insisted on folding laundry herself, but she didn't argue when I took the garbage out. I helped with homework twice that week. Math was easy. Writing was not. Faith's assignment was to describe a safe place. She drew the front steps of the duplex, with a little crooked railing and 1 sneaker by the door. "You sure?" I asked her. "You can pick anything." She didn't even look up. "That's the one I know best." That night I picked up gym shoes for her and a basic art kit. Pencils, watercolor pans, small brushes. Nothing flashy. I left the receipt on the table and didn't take the tags off. Hannah saw both and gave me a single nod. That meant more than a speech. Proud people see respect in habits. Small, quiet habits that don't beg for praise. On Thursday, we went to her school. The counselor was polite, guarded at first, until I said, I'd like to be added as an emergency contact. She looked at Hannah. Hannah looked at me. She's good with it, I said, and I'm not going anywhere. The counselor wrote it down in ink. Faith turned to me after, squinting like I'd pulled a rabbit out of a hat. She whispered, "No one's ever done that for me." "In our family," I told her, "we don't do rabbits. We do names on forms and people who show up on Tuesdays." She smiled like she'd been handed a password to something secret. That night at dinner, she asked the question I'd known was coming. "Are you going to stay for good?" "Yes," I said. Then I kept going. That means rides, boring meetings, pancakes on Sundays. It means helping with homework even when I don't get the assignment. It means letting you win at board games sometimes. "You don't have to let me win," she said, serious. "I know," I said, "but I might anyway." That earned me a smile and a jab in the arm. Saturday morning, I took her down to Shore Road Promenade. She'd been eyeing the bigger bike for a while, the one with actual gears and a brake lever that made her feel like a superhero. I held the seat while she pedaled, jogging behind her like a dad from a commercial. She wobbled once, corrected, and yelled, "Let go." I did. She didn't fall. She just kept going, straight down the stretch, hair flying behind her, yelling, "Did you see that?" I did. Turns out I'd been the one slowing her down. Patrick pulled me aside later at the park, while Faith sat eating a dripping rainbow ice. "You don't have to earn this," he said. "You just have to show up." I looked at him. "I'm trying." He gave a half nod. "I know." No more words. Just that. It was enough. Back at the house, he fixed a cabinet door that had been catching every time Hannah tried to close it. Jenna showed up 10 minutes later, escrow docs in her hand, and sat at the kitchen table with Hannah going line by line. They didn't talk much, just flipped pages, made notes, checked dates. Two women with no time for mess, solving a problem like neighbors do when the stakes are personal. I stayed out of the way. That night I found myself washing mugs I hadn't used. Hannah walked in behind me and said, "We can do this without you hovering." I laughed and said, "I know, I'm learning." We stood there next to each other, just breathing in the kind of quiet you earn the hard way. Later I texted her a photo I'd taken of Faith on the bigger bike, mid-ride, arms stiff, face focused. I wrote, "Proud of her." Hannah wrote back, "Me too." I filed it in a folder I'd made on my phone labeled Keep. Not deals, not receipts, just keep. I told Hannah we'd formalize whatever she was ready to formalize. Guardianship, paperwork, legal names. But I wouldn't push. I didn't need to. Sometimes it's enough just to be asked to sit and stay. The next morning I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and paused halfway through my inbox. Something was missing. It took me another minute to figure it out. A full day had gone by, and Norman hadn't crossed my mind once. That might be the exact definition of winning. The City Maritime Trust gave us provisional access to 2 piers in Sunset Park. It wasn't glossy, it wasn't branded, but it was ours. Coleman called it the kind of attention we want. That's what she said as she handed over the signed letter of intent. Clean, sharp font. No flourishes. We moved fast after that. Load schedules, truck permits, sequencing meetings. Work, the kind that smells like sawdust and salt. I missed that kind of work. Norman took one last swing. His lawyer sent over a cooperation amendment, posing as philanthropy. Thin veil, language about shared opportunity, mutual visibility, a note about how shared values ensure long-term stability. It reeked. Our independent counsel replied with exactly 3 lines. "Thanks for the offer. We decline. City copied for transparency." Patrick read the reply without blinking. I did the same. Jenna's fingerprints were all over the strategy, but no signature, just the clean execution she always delivers. Jessica texted me that afternoon. He yelled. I didn't. I asked if she was okay. She wrote, "He'll cool down." I believed her. She'd walked off the chessboard and didn't leave a piece behind. She's stronger than the version people built around her. That same week, Zach's brother folded. He came in all puffed up until Jenna walked him through the title chain, then laid out, politely, dryly, how that family loan would expose his preparer to a bar complaint and possibly invite a consumer fraud filing. She didn't yell. She didn't posture. She just spoke like someone who knew the law and had time. He blinked, signed the release, grabbed the $10,000 we'd escrowed, and left without a word. We didn't watch him leave. We had real things to do. At the Friday investor call, someone asked about reputational risk. It was bound to happen. I didn't make it a speech. I just said, I chased control and forgot about people. We've got doc access now, stronger team, more clarity. That's the report. It landed. The room didn't need dramatics, just facts. Patrick pulled me aside after and asked if I'd say something at their engagement dinner. You don't have to make it a show, he said. I wrote 5 versions that night, tossed all of them. At the dinner, I stood, held up my glass, and said, I trust you. Then I shut up. That was the right amount of weight. The room settled. You could feel the tension dial down. The next morning, I went to pick up Hannah and Faith. Faith met me at the door with a small overnight bag already zipped. I packed, she said. I want to see your site. You sure? I asked. Yup. I said yes without needing to think. I'm learning to say yes faster. On the drive, Hannah reached into her purse and handed me a small box. Black velvet, ring box. It was empty. If you ever ask, she said, ask for me, not for the plan. I turned it over in my hand. No gold, no ring, just a reminder. Empty on purpose, so I'd stop proposing to blueprints. We parked near the cranes. Faith leaned on the fence and watched the machines like they were dinosaurs waking up. It's loud, she said, eyes wide. Too loud? No, it's perfect. I told her I'd bring earplugs next time. She laughed. That laugh stayed in my chest longer than most things ever do. That night, Norman's PR team leaked a rumor to a trade newsletter. Some mess about us being frozen out of waterfront approvals. The City Maritime Trust posted our letter of intent 20 minutes later. It went up with the timestamp, signature, and an official seal. That was the end of that. I went home and slept with the window cracked. The low city noise outside didn't bother me this time. But something else did. I lay there staring at the ceiling and realized I didn't want to be alone in that apartment much longer. I'd been calling it independence. It was just an empty room when the lights were off. The next morning I got up early and bought a plain ring. No diamonds, no story, just something you could wear in a real life. I texted Patrick. Breakfast? He sent back. Always. I asked Hannah to marry me in her kitchen with cold tea on the counter and a grocery list under my palm. It wasn't a performance. I didn't picture a future or drag out a ring box with symbolism. I told her I'd show up, parent with her, and keep our doors open to the people who mattered. I said I didn't want a perfect house. I wanted a full one. She didn't cry or gasp or play coy. She just said, yes, like it was a decision she'd already made and was glad I'd finally caught up. Faith clapped once and said, "Does that mean pancakes every Sunday?" I told her we could negotiate. She narrowed her eyes. "Okay, Tuesdays too." Hannah pointed a spoon at her. "You're going to school on Tuesdays." Faith shrugged. "We can still have pancakes." The next weekend we had a small family brunch. My place. Too much food, not enough room around the table. Patrick stood behind Jenna like he'd been born there, and I stood up before I could overthink it. I didn't deliver a speech. I didn't talk about empire or legacy. I just said, I was wrong about what makes a family work. I get it now. Then I told them to eat. That was it. The silence that followed felt like oxygen. Norman didn't show his face for weeks, which was a relief. When the city announced our births with the community trust, he finally sent a one-line email. "Congratulations on the workaround." I replied, it wasn't a workaround, it was a better way. and I left it there. A receptionist brought me an envelope a few days later. Small cream card with Jessica's handwriting. It said, "Choose each other. Everything else gets easier." I stuck it in the drawer where that bad NDA used to sit. Better use for the space. We formalized what needed formalizing with Faith. No speeches, no drama, just signatures that matched the truth on paper. She watched the pens move and asked, "Are you still going to show up for boring school things when this is done?" "The papers don't decide that," I said. "I do, and those are my favorite things." She nodded like she'd take me at my word and check my homework later. The Red Hook site broke ground without fanfare. No champagne, no speeches. Crews showed up, trucks backed in, and concrete met dirt. The project most people thought we couldn't pull off without a big name was moving under our own steam, on our own schedule. One night, sitting around bowls of pasta and bad salad, Patrick told me he was proud of me. I told him fathers don't usually get that line. He said he meant it. I believed him, even though belief has always been the slowest gear for me. Then we argued about phasing for 15 minutes like two guys who actually liked the work and weren't afraid to fight for a better version of it. We called it even when Faith rolled her eyes so hard she almost fell off her chair. I kept Hannah's old letter in a simple frame on a shelf by the couch. Not a shrine, not a wound, just ink on paper that reminded me what silence costs. I spent too long thinking control was care and risk was recklessness. Turns out love is neither of those things. It's a decision you renew every day without a contract or a clause. One night I sat on the couch with Hannah's feet on my lap and Faith asleep down the hall, and I realized something I would have mocked 5 years ago. I'd traded scale for substance and somehow landed both. If there's a moral here, it's simple. I spent years confusing control with care. When I stopped treating love like a contract and started choosing people without terms, the work got better, the deals got cleaner, and I got my family back. One honest promise at a time. Quick thing before you scroll, let me throw this out there. Have you ever realized too late that holding on too tight was the very thing pushing people away? If that hits even a little, please tap hype to help this story reach more folks. And if you liked it, hit subscribe and give it a quick like. It means a lot on our end. Drop a comment too, even just good story, or tell me what part stuck with you.